Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg. Dan Buettner, my guest today, is a household name in wellness circles, especially among those of us who study aging and longevity. His entity, the Blue Zones, was born of his research as a journalist for National Geographic. He reported his findings of communities with increased longevity, identified as Blue Zones, and in his cover story for National Geographic magazine's November 2005 edition, Secrets of a Long Life, the issue became the third best-selling in the magazine's history. Welcome, Dan.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I know you have several books out under the Blue Zones umbrella, and you're now set to release the Blue Zones Kitchen, 100 Recipes to Live to Be 100. I want to start out by discussing what are the Blue Zones?
There are 5 areas around the world where people live statistically longest. And as you point out in the introduction, they do tend to have a high concentration of centenarians, but more importantly, they have the lowest rate of middle-age mortality. In other words, they're reaching 95. The average maximum life expectancy for most of us living in the developed world, if we have an average set of genes, is 94 or 95. If people tell you they're going to help you live to 100, they probably have their hand in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have won the genetic lottery to make it to 100. But in Blue Zones, they're reaching that age 95 in the highest proportions, and most significantly, without the chronic diseases that are taking our country. A fifth the rate of heart disease, a tenth the rate of diabetes in some cases, a fifth the rate of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. So they're making it until 95, staying sharp until the end, and not blowing their family fortune on unnecessary health care at the end of their lives, like most Americans do.
So you identified, I did a little research and I've watched, I think, every movie and documentary on this. The Blue Zones are 5 zones throughout the world where you find that people live to be 95 without, I shouldn't say complete absence of disease. But what I find very interesting, Dan, is I really hate the term anti-aging, and I'm pro-aging. But this is about people just living their lives and just loving their lives until they're no longer on the earth.
That's right. The same things that help you reach a healthy age 95 are also the characteristics highly correlated with happiness. I also wrote a cover story for National Geographic in 2018 on happiness and found that the statistical underpinnings to happiness. So what does data say? And having a strong social network, for example, hugely predictive of longevity. If you have a strong social circle around you, you live about 8 years longer than if you're lonely. Eating a whole food plant-based diet, we know people who eat like that report 20% higher levels of subjective well-being. People who live in walkable communities have lower BMI, higher life expectancy, but they're also more socially connected and therefore happier. Religious people tend to be happier and live longer. So people who are in committed families, the list goes on and on. And, we're on such a quest for the quick fix for longevity or anti-aging, as I agree with you on that term, that we forget that there are dozens of small things around us that if we paid attention to them, optimize them in our lives, the average American, the people listening to us right now, could probably live about 13 extra years over an average American by just paying attention to the small things.
And that's very profound, Dan, because, the bulk of our population right now is between 55 and 70. The tail end of the baby boomers, the people born between 1956 and 1964. And that's who should be listening to us, right? Because you're still lucid and can make a lot of changes in your 50s and 60s. Contrary to popular belief, people will say, I'm in my 60s. I can't, there's nothing else I can do. There's plenty to be done. I always say that. Again, what is the number one prevailing theme among these communities that result in their longevity? What's the one thing that they all have in common? Because I know there's probably a few differences.
So this is counterintuitive. none of them have discipline. None of them have heroic individual responsibility when it comes to their health. None of them are on a diet. None of them exercise, go to CrossFit or yoga or buy supplements. None of that. The insight, which took me about 8 years to see, was they are not pursuing health. We tend to live in a society that pursues health, and what I mean by that is you sort of get an idea of a diet or an exercise program or a supplement regimen. We think we're going to stick to it, but we never do.
Right.
Single-digit percentages, maybe stick to it for over a year. In Blue Zones, the overarching lesson is if you want to live longer, don't try to change your behaviors, change your environment. People in all Blue Zones live in environments where every time they go to work, a friend's house, or out to eat, it occasions a walk. The cheapest, most accessible, and most delicious foods are made from peasant ingredients, nuts and grains and beans and tubers and greens, and they're ubiquitous. They have time-honored recipes to make them taste good. They born into societies with strong senses of identity and strong senses of purpose, and the option to be lonely, to implode in your room with your iPhone or handheld device doesn't exist. Every time you step out your door, you're bumping into people. It's expected you're going to be part of an extended family. You're expected to show up to church or to village parties and events. And there's enough social pressure that kind of anti-loneliness situation doesn't exist in Blue Zones. So this all adds up to an extra 8 to 10 years in the case of Blue Zones. Good
Amazing.
news.
And I imagine in these communities, the children are more connected to their parents and grandparents than we see in the United States.
Aging parents are almost always kept with the rest of the family. So there's more often than not a natural bond between grandma and grandkids, because grandparents their wisdom and their lifelong skills are actually put to work and not warehoused in some soulless retirement home in Florida or Arizona or Southern California or something.
Now let's take a look at the American lifestyle. Processed foods, sugar, high meat consumption, and minimal activity. I read in your new book, 100 Recipes to Live to Be 100. Love it.
Actually, the new book, just to be clear, it's called The Blue Zone American Kitchen.
The Blue Zone American Kitchen. Okay, great. And you wrote a section in there about, how we got here. And we don't have to spend that much time on it because I encourage everybody to please read the book and get the book. But we talk about how did we get here that we're so far away from what is a healthy lifestyle, and we think we're all living a healthy lifestyle. I'm guilty of it as well, as much as I think I know.
Well, humans are innovative species, and Americans are even more innovative than the average human. And for most of history, life was difficult and uncomfortable and hungry, and we've innovated to a point where now we can't escape cheap, unhealthy calories. We've engineered most physical activity out of our lives with, the ubiquity of the automobile and electronic conveniences. Until 1960, there weren't enough calories in America to go around. And it was the ingeniousness of, I hate to say it, but Richard Nixon's agricultural policies that created the calories we need. But now those policies have overproduced. There's 4,200 calories produced every year for every day for every American. That's about twice what we need. And they're cheap grains and sugars and carbohydrates. And these innovative marketing companies like General Mills and Kraft, they're very good at taking these cheap inputs, making them irresistibly delicious,
right,
and flooding them on the market for much less than it costs to, buy organic vegetables. So, we do what our pocketbooks and our genes tell us to do. Occasionally we can override it with discipline, but it doesn't work for the most part.
Right, and
And the
that's where we're having to change our mindset comes in.
No, I disagree. It's not
Really?
our mindset, it's our environment. We can change our mindset, but it never lasts. We change our mindset every year after the new year, and we get on a resolution to eat better and get more exercise, and it lasts on average till January 19th. And, I don't mean to jump on you
No,
on that.
that's okay. I'm just saying the practical aspects. Not all of us can sell our houses and move to Sardinia, which I would love to do. But
No, but we can take the environmental features of Sardinia and
mhm.
incorporate it into our the way we design our kitchens, our homes, our social lives, and our work lives. And that's what I did in the Blue Zone Challenge. I marshaled in 30 evidence-based ways to reshape your surroundings so your unconscious decisions are better.
That's what I wanted to bring up too. I read in the book that you have actually sought out blue zones in the United States. I want to read this off. This is amazing. Indigenous, Native and Early American, African American, Latin American, Asian American, and regional and contemporary American. That's how the book is broken down. So, tell us about those regions, and also why did you choose to make the book vegetarian, even though many blue zone diets do include some meat?
So the So I'll start with that last part of the question
Mhm.
first. So yes, in blue zones, on average, they're eating meat about 5 times per month, traditionally speaking. But as you point out, my daytime job over the past 15 years has been working with cities to create blue zones. And I found that the minute I talk about pork in Sardinia or something, people think, oh my God, pork is a longevity food, and they're eating bacon for breakfast and pork hot dogs for
Right.
lunch and pork chops for dinner. No, we know that's not dinner. What Under the Blue Zone brand, I make sure that every food that I talk about is absolutely healthy for almost everybody. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, a whole food, plant-based diet is the healthiest diet we can be eating. I don't know of any credible research that refutes that. I know the internet's full of, people who are big fans of beef and so forth, and they lift weight. They marshal in some threadbare research on the value of meat, but I chose not. In the Blue Zone's American Kitchen, this new book coming out December 6th, I sought to find the lost diet of longevity in America. I sought to find any subcultures in America who were essentially eating a Blue Zones diet. So, the Blue Zone diet, I worked with National Geographic and Harvard, did a meta-analysis of 155 dietary surveys over the past 80 years. So if you want to know what a 100-year-old ate to live to be 100, you got to know what they were eating throughout their lives.
Right.
So we got a very clear idea, 90 to 100% whole food plant-based, mostly greens, grains, nuts, beans, and tubers. And then I went looking for American populations who ate this way. And I hired a researcher at NYU. We found 90 different dietary surveys and anthropology studies that date back between 1890 and 1920. And lo and behold, among the African Americans, Asians, Latin, and Native Americans, they were eating a Blue Zone diet. Holy. And when you dive into the cuisine, so for the Blue Zone American Kitchen, I took photographer, National Geographic photographer David McLean. We found chef historians who knew how to recreate this lost diet of longevity, and were shocked at, firstly, how delicious it was. It's pretty easy to put a bunch of animal fat and sugar on cotton balls and make them taste good. But the real culinary genius comes from these ethnicities who know how to prepare things so that the textures and the spice nuances and the way they're cooked make them absolutely sing. And you know what else? They're affordable.
Right.
inputs for these food any American can afford. And they don't take that long to prepare. And that's the great untold secret of the American diet that I tried to bring to light in the Blue Zone's American Kitchen.
I think you know more than anyone that people often associate, especially in my lifetime. I'm 61, and I feel like I have hopefully have many years to come, and I've been at this for a while. And the association of a plant-based diet and poverty drives me crazy. You know, people say, well, to show off to your company, you want to serve beef or you want to serve chicken or an expensive fish. If we only serve vegetarian, it looks cheap. Or if we serve a bean dish, it looks less than. Nothing can be further from the truth. I agree with you as well. But, you know, it's a mindset that it's kind of an uphill battle where people really associate that with peasantry or poverty food. That's probably a post-depression era attitude, but it's there. You know, especially people who had grandparents who went without. So, Dan, that brings me to my next question: is when speaking with people 50 and older, I'd mentioned this earlier. The prevailing theme is, well, I'm too old. It's too late. I can no longer lose weight. I'm too tired to exercise. I'm too old to give up the foods that we love. How can we encourage these people?
Well, it's never too late. You could be 99 years old and you can make a few simple changes, mainly just walking, which is about 90% of the physical activity benefits of training for a marathon. We know that an 80-year-old can add an extra 3 years of life expectancy by moving away from a standard American diet and getting mostly whole food plant-based, not even 100%.
Right.
So there's good research that shows it's never too late. And guess what? You'll not only live longer, you'll feel better in the short run. And you'll probably look better too, by the way. Which some
Yeah.
people
Yeah, it makes a very, very big difference. You know, you also mentioned in your work that making it to 100, it means you've won the genetic lottery. Is that changing? Are people living longer due to lifestyle choices, or is that staying put now, that number?
the percentage of people making it to 100 staying put. There's more people in America, so you get more centenarians.
Yes.
Just
Okay.
but the percentage remains the same. In fact, it's dropped over the past 3 years, along with life expectancy. So, there's no good evidence to suggest that the biological ceiling of our age has risen. And there's lots of talk about metformin and testosterone therapy and resveratrol, but none of those drugs or genetic interventions have been shown in humans to extend life expectancy. There's some theoretical work being done. So instead of getting involved in theoretical, there may be some amazing breakthrough on the scientific horizon. We can't see it yet, but my approach is, instead of looking for a secret to longevity in a test tube, why not find the populations who've achieved the outcomes we want, which is a healthy age 90 or 95 without disease and a beautiful fast death.
Yeah.
Sure, most people make it to 100, but they're outliers. About 1 in 2,500 Americans make it to 100.
Okay.
And so they're unlikely. They're outliers.
My mother-in-law lived to be 103, and we had her in the house with us. We believe in multi-generational living.
Probably lived to 103 because she was with you.
Yeah, she stayed home with us, and you know, so my daughter had her grandmother in the house, and we had four generations living in the house together at one time. It was really, really lovely. And my husband was 70. She lived to his 70th birthday. She died on his 70th birthday, and she felt that, you know, it had completed the circle, that he lived to be 70, and she was here to see it. So it was absolutely amazing. You know, I wanted to also go back and talk about these zones. I've studied it. Okinawa, Japan; Sardinia, Italy; Icaria, Greece; Nicoya, Costa Rica; and the Seventh Day Adventists in Loma Linda, California. Dan, was there any of these regions that are more near and dear to you, or that you like, or you model your life after? Was there one area that in particular that spoke to you?
My dearest friends are in Icaria.
Hmm.
There's a guest house there named Thea's Guest House, which I just think is the metaphorical nucleus of the Blue Zone worldwide. And they most of their food comes from a huge organic garden. People gather there from all over the world. They're interested in longevity. People walk everywhere, and that's when I get to Icaria, my genes feel like they're at home. I also like Costa Rica quite a bit. It's sunny and tropical, and you're near the beach, and there's wonderful tropical fruits, and it's relatively safe. A lot of people speak English.
Mhm.
I would say those two are my top.
So for encouraging travel, let's send everybody to the blue zone. Stop going to these overdeveloped cities and start going somewhere you can relax your body and your mind and learn something, just from the people without having to sit in a classroom. Um, Dan, I want to thank you so much for joining us here. Dan has a new book coming out, Blue Zone's American Kitchen, 100 Recipes to Live to be 100. Now, is it now available for pre-order? And please tell us where we can start ordering our copies from.
Yeah, well, I always encourage people to go to their local bookstore, but you can also get it on Amazon.
Mm.
And you pre-order it now; it'll be delivered well before Christmas. And it's the gift of life.
Yes.
100 recipes to live to 100.
Absolutely. And as an aside, I want to mention since 1888, the National Geographic Society has funded more than 14,000 research, conservation, education, and storytelling projects around the world. National Geographic Partners distributes a portion of the funds it receives from your purchase to National Geographic Society to support programs including the conservation of animals and their habitats. So that's a wonderful little bonus if you buy the book as well. Dan, my big question to you is, because you're the guru, please tell us what you like about getting older.
There's less peer pressure. Both my grandmother, now my mother, and increasingly me, you tend to be satisfied with less.
Mm-hmm.
So that old adage, the secret to happiness is not getting what you want, but being satisfied with what you have. That's more and more true with each decade. And that's certainly the case for me.
Fantastic. And I wish you all the happiness for many, many, many years to come. Thank you again, Dan. And thank you all for listening to my show. Please subscribe on YouTube to Patricia Greenberg and tune in again for our engaging discussions on all things aging well. For feedback and topic requests, and also more information about Dan, you can contact me at patriciagreenberg.com. Thank you again, Dan. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Patricia.